Hey, I'm Josh.
And I'm Allison.
And we're the Camera Project.
And today we're in Brooklyn Bridge Park and we are doing some tests with the Panasonic Lumix GH5. It's the latest and greatest from Panasonic's GH line of cameras.
So we asked our subscribers what they wanted to see in a GH5 review, and overwhelmingly people said all the videos out there on YouTube are solely focusing on the video of this camera. So they want to know about what the still capabilities are as well. So we're going to focus on both stills and video, and we're going to explore the park here today.
Brooklyn Bridge Park occupies this narrow area of land between the Brooklyn Bridge and Atlantic Avenue and up against the East River here with Manhattan right across. The East River is still very much a working thoroughfare for ships and ferries and boats doing work, bringing things in and out. And this was very much an industrial merchant port back in the 1800s with lots of warehouses to store goods that service both Brooklyn and Manhattan, including tobacco, sugar, coffee, animal skins, etc. And so now, as you can see, in the last decade or so, as the park was being developed, and it's still being developed, they've done an amazing job of kind of preserving the piers that were such a part of this industrial area, as well as building up these beautiful green spaces that act as very convincing jungle-like little forests that give you a pretty good sense of seclusion and nature, even though we are obviously very deep in the heart of a bustling working city here. So before we get into the test with the GH5, we want to go over the form factor really quick. Anyone who's familiar with the Panasonic Lumix GH4 will not have too many surprises here. It's pretty similar. It's a bit bigger, a bit heavier. The grip is a little more substantial on this guy than it was on the previous camera. And throughout the line, the GH series have just gotten bigger and bigger as they've gone on. It has the fully articulating, rotating screen here. It's also a touch screen, which is great. The new features on this body that are different from the GH4 that you may notice are this joystick on the back, which allows you to adjust your focus point as well as control the menu. And you can also set it to custom functions, which is pretty cool. And it's got a dual SD card slot. So you can have two cards in here, which allows you to theoretically record double what you normally would have without stopping. Theoretically, you could, if you were connected to power, kind of swap cards in as you're shooting to continue your video endlessly, really.
The other thing that the dual card slots lets you do is have a redundant backup of everything you're shooting. This point becomes particularly painful for us after shooting these tests. Now is as good a point as any to talk about what happened after we completed our shoot. Both cards were fine while in the GH5, but when I plugged in card 1 into the reader to copy the data from the shoot, while it started out okay, something quickly went wrong, and for some reason the card got corrupted. 2 recovery software attempts later, I brought the card home to try some other options when card 1 was somehow lost in transit. Now, if we had checked the dual card settings before the shoot, this wouldn't have been an issue whatsoever. However, the cards were each set to store different types of files. Card 1, the video and RAW files, card 2, the 6K photo and JPEGs. So with that in mind, many of our video-related tests and footage for the shoot will have to be omitted, and all still comparisons we made from Brooklyn Bridge Park will be based on JPEGs. We will also reference some earlier tests we did before we had to return the camera, and for those we'll use full RAWs for better comparison. This whole experience just drives home how important redundancy and dual card slots are for professional work. No matter how rare corruption or loss may be, it can happen. The GH5 has Panasonic's latest dual IS2 image stabilization. And what that means is, in combination with its newest lenses, like the 12-35 version 2 that I have on here right now, it will use both lens and sensor-based stabilization to theoretically get 4 or 5 stops of shake reduction. Now, I have this crazy rig set up where I'm gonna try to test it versus the Olympus EM5 Mark II. And it's not Olympus's latest image stabilization, that would be the EM1 Mark II, but still it should be a good test of what we know is a really great image stabilizer. Neither of them are gonna perform to their best because I have them hooked up to each other, so hopefully they both have the same shake. I'm gonna do this crazy test. If you look behind me, you'll see the tripods are all set up over there, but I am trying to do it all handheld. So we'll see how it goes. I won't be able to have a crazy slow shutter speed, but maybe a half or a quarter of a second to get the waves crashing against the pylons and get the city behind me. 1/10 of a second, let's see how they both do. To 1/6 of a second and see how they do. And 1/4 of a second. Now, we are kind of getting to the limits of the exposures here because I'm at f/22 and I can't close down either lens anymore. If I had an ND filter, I'd be able to try it, but I'll actually try to do one where it's just overexposed and see if it's stable regardless. 1/3 of a second on each, and do a 1/2 second on each. And lastly, let's just try to do a full second on each. So while the EM5 Mark II seemed to be the clear winner in still stabilization, I really did like the stabilization for video with the GH5. It was prone to less of the weird artifacts that I often notice with the EM5 Mark II when you move too suddenly and you get this weird warp stabilized kind of effect. So here's what it looks like if I just turn it off completely. The other thing I found really impressive on the GH5 in terms of video was the 180 frames per second at full 1080 video recording.
So we're here in Brooklyn Bridge Park, and it's one of the newer parks in New York City. And one of the things that's really cool about it is how much public art there is within the park. Right here, we've got this work called Descension by Anish Kapoor, and it's kind of just looks like a hot tub. It's a bunch of swirling water. And a lot of the art that's in this park is kind of modern and abstract. It's very large and sculptural a lot of the time. Sometimes it's interactive, which is just makes it really fun and really cool thing to have in an outdoor space. There's been a lot of talk online about the autofocus in video mode on the GH5 and whether it's good or not so good. But since we're trying to kind of cover stills more, since a lot of other people are talking about video, we want to talk about autofocus in the still mode with this camera. So we're already losing light rapidly here, but we are shooting with this Leica Prime 1.2 lens. So hopefully we'll still get some pretty good shots here. And let's give that a try.
Yeah, we'll give it a shot. My testing with video, I didn't find it stellar either, but let's see how it stills does.
All right.
First, we're gonna start with a face tracking test. I'm gonna set it to face/eye detection and point it at Allison. Now, I'm gonna set it all the way wide to 1.2, so there's not a lot of room for error in terms of my focus points. Let's see if it finds her, first of all, and then see how it sticks with her. All right, here it goes. Start walking, Allison. All right, seemed like it stuck with her. Let's do it one more time. I'm gonna set it to a higher frame rate. Here it goes. All right, it seemed very good to me, actually. Now we're gonna do another test where instead of setting it to face tracking priority, I'm just gonna set it to tracking. And this is essentially where I can point to a part on Allison and it should follow her. And I'm already half holding it down and start going, Allison.
So in addition to the really great autofocus tracking in this camera, it's got 6K and I believe 4K photo mode, which is kind of, to boil it down, essentially taking a 6K or 4K video clip almost. It's taking 30 frames per second at 4 or 6K and then allowing you to choose a still from that video clip, essentially. Josh, do you want to?
Yeah, the only difference actually is in 4K you could actually get 60 frames a second. So that's why you would choose 4K over 6K.
Right.
But 30 frames a second at essentially 18 megapixels is really nice. The only downside is no RAW. So let's find a biker or a jogger and see how it does at 30 frames a second.
Here comes another one. Get him.
I love the views from up here, especially at dusk now, because the lights of the building come on and you kind of get that. And we'll go right up this way. And then in the summertime,
Now the cool thing about 6K photo is there's a bunch of different ways you can handle it. You can just hit the button and keep holding it till you want to stop, or you could actually set it to 6K pre, which is actually constantly buffering the scene. So the second you hit that shutter button, it's actually getting you 30 frames before you hit the shutter button. So if you just missed that action, you actually didn't miss it at all, which is really amazing.
One of my favorite cool new features of the Panasonic GH5 is the ability to preset a rack focus using autofocus. It's a little bit tricky to set up, but once you do, it's amazingly accurate and super useful. So I'm gonna try and set one up right now. So we've got it set to the function 1 button, which will significantly save you some time in sifting through the menus. You just set that focus pull setting, position 1, 2, and 3. So you kind of set your positions in advance using your focus ring, obviously. So I'm gonna start with something very close like these flowers. And once I've got that just focused the way that I want, I'm going to press set, and then position 2, not set, and then I will set it. Oops. Set the skyline here. So this is obviously a drastic focus shift set. Okay, and then go back. You can set up to 3 points, and then you can change the speed there, other factors here. Press start. So then down here, you have position 1. Now it's focused on my flowers, and if I tilt up and hit position 2, the city is in focus. I can come back down to my flowers. Position 1.
So for anyone who's ever seen one of our reviews, you know I'm a huge stickler on auto ISO on cameras, and specifically having a minimum shutter speed setting. Up until the GH5, Panasonic cameras have not had this, and to this point it is still the only Panasonic camera with this feature. What it allows you to do is set a minimum shutter speed if you're in aperture priority, that the action won't go below, say, 1/250th of a second before it bumps the ISO up. But it could go up to any speed higher than that. So it's great for street photography, it's great for just being able to shoot knowing you want to freeze action, and I'm so glad Panasonic has finally done this, and I really hope they add it to their old cameras via firmware.
So here we are again under a street lamp in New York City, running out of daylight to shoot our review video. And I think right now we want to talk about some low light photography and how this camera is handling that, and especially at higher ISOs. Personally, I am a GH4 owner, and I, like many people, have not been impressed with the stills out of that camera. It's something I do mostly use for video, and it's the sort of thing I can't put my finger on what I don't like about the stills out of the GH4. I'm inclined to say it has something to do with noise at higher ISOs, but that can start even at ISO 1600. So should we take a look at how this thing is handling those higher ISOs and photography in low light? Yeah,
we have the Leica 1.2 Prime on here, so we can probably lower our ISO if we need to, but we're going to be testing the ISOs higher, and we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
The camera goes all the way up to ISO 25,600, and I certainly don't expect it to be usable at that ISO, but we'll see how it does. Maybe ISO 6400, maybe ISO 8000 will be usable. Obviously that depends on your usage, but we'll review and see what we think. All right, we're starting at ISO 400, 800, 1600, 3200, 6400, and now I'm going to do smaller increments. So let's see how it does against the Olympus EM5 Mark II's 16 megapixel sensor if we're comparing RAWs between the two photos. And let's see what the video ISOs of this camera look like.
So guys, that wraps up our test of the Panasonic GH5 in Brooklyn Bridge Park. I hope you guys found some of what we found to be enlightening and interesting. And thank you so much for watching. As always, please subscribe to our channel if you like this video, and we'd love to hear your comments, questions, anything you want to know about the GH5. Hopefully we could try to answer it for you. Subscribe. leave it in the comments.